Blanked in Game 6, Carolina shuts out Vegas at the Fortress to capture the Stanley Cup. Now the end of the season raises some tough questions. Why did this team fail to secure the Cup? Should Coach Torts be back? And did Aiden Hill deserve an opportunity to play? We're going to answer all those questions and so much more, starting right now on Sin City Beat.
From Las Vegas, this is Sin City Beat.
Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us here on Sin City Beat. I'm your host, Mike Davis. Sin City Beat is the show that dissects the Vegas sports world through the eyes of the sports reporters and storytellers leading the charge. Joining the action on the panel, we have Case Kiefer, assistant sports editor with the Las Vegas Sun, Derek Hegna, reporter with the Sporting Tribune, and Tony Cordasco, host of the Locked On Golden Knights podcast. Thanks so much for being here, guys. So let's dive right in. The Vegas Golden Knights lose Game 6 at home, failing to force a Game 7 against the Carolina Hurricanes. Case, how and why did Carolina dominate in Game 6?
I just feel like the Hurricanes figured the Golden Knights out as the series went on. You look at what the last 3 games, the Golden Knights led for 5 minutes when they scored early in Game 5. They really made some tweaks that worked out greatly, and the Golden Knights had no answer. When it was their turn to counter, they couldn't counter, and you saw all that kind of snowball on them in Game 6. You talk to the Golden Knights, they feel like they played a little bit better than the 3-0 scoreline, and I guess you could see that, but no matter how you slice it, a disappointing way to go out.
Yeah, Tony, I think, did you predict this?
Yeah, spot on. 6 games, yeah.
And why
and Ray gave me a hard time. Ray Brewer
he
said, "There's no way that the Golden Knights are going to lose on home ice in Game 6. What are you talking about?"
So how
Ray.
How and why did this play out?
How and why? Oh, fatigue. Fatigue was number one at the top of my list, and that led to a lot of turnovers for the Golden Knights. Again, in this series, the Golden Knights come out hitting, right, in Game 3. 66 hits, and then after that, I said they hit themselves out. Like, that's it. That's their shot, and they're going to lose the next game, and they might lose out here. I really felt that way. That's, again, very predictable to me on what this team is all about. And then that man-for-man defense is just so stifling. I mean, really, they did a number on the Golden Knights, and to limit the Golden Knights in game number 6 to just 22 shots on goal. And we know the story about Braden Bussey, but he was phenomenal. Again, the big plays, he robbed Dorofeev, and then he's sitting on his wallet, and Hurdle comes into the crease, and he's just sitting there, okay, got this one too. But
he had a tremendous series. We're going to be breaking down that decision. Of course, he comes in third period, Game 3, taking over for Frederick Anderson, so we'll break that down. But Derek, your take on Game 6, of course, being blanked out like that, a shutout on home ice at the Fortress, just a defeating blow that is just going to stick with many medieval maniacs for the entire offseason.
Well, yeah, it's something that I told a lot of fans or people really is that it wasn't so much a case of the Golden Knights didn't give an effort. It was that there was just no more effort left to really give. Mm-hmm. You have the main core of these guys like Eichel, Hannafin, Marner. Remember, all of those guys went deep into the Olympics, went into overtime. Those are not nothing games. Those are games with heavy implications for country, all that stuff. So all of a sudden you have to go into the grind of the postseason, which we know is draining for a lot of teams. And I feel that Game 3 comeback, having to be forced into double overtime, that was the worst thing that could have happened in hindsight because it forced the Golden Knights to burn much more energy than they wanted to. We started to see the cracks form in Game 5. In Game 6, you could tell just from the body language from really the back half of the second period onwards, there was just nothing left.
Case, I think a lot of fans today are probably thinking, did we deserve to win this? Should this have been a series where the Vegas Golden Knights get their second Stanley Cup, defeating the Mammoth, defeating the Ducks, then taking down the Avalanche, a team that many people thought was the greatest team in the entire NHL this season. Of course, President's Trophy winners. Should they have defeated this team, or were the Carolina Hurricanes really the better team in all aspects?
I don't think they should have won. I think time will be kind to this run. I think once we get a few years down the road, we'll look back and say, wow, the Golden Knights, we were talking about missing the playoffs. They were having such a disappointing season. They end up getting to the Stanley Cup Final. I think you just ran into a team that was better than you. Now, granted, the Avalanche were better than them too, and we saw what they did to the Avalanche. But I do think the Hurricanes just had fewer questions. They were more consistent for the year as a whole. So ultimately, the best team doesn't always win in hockey, but I feel like it did this year. And I don't think that should be the mentality.
Okay, piggybacking, last thing here. I'm going to give you, Tony, the last word in this block. answer what Case just posed there, which I think is really interesting. Avalanche were the better team. Somehow VGK found a way.
Right.
Why did they not find a way in this series?
Against a hot team that went 16-3, and that 11-game gap before the Montreal series was beneficial to their health. I know they came out flat in Game 1 against Montreal, and they lost, and they laid an egg in that game. But I felt in the long run, it really did help them out, and that was the fresher team, the team with the fresher legs. And when you could tell the Golden Knights had fatigue, but why not shorten the shifts there to get fresher legs on the ice? That was one of the things I couldn't understand, because they kept turning the puck over as a sign of fatigue. The better team definitely won. Goaltending was a question mark. We talked about it all season long here. I just didn't know if this was a team that was going to capture the Stanley Cup.
Okay, Tony Cordasco providing that great transition for me, because we're going to talk goaltending coming up. We got a lot to discuss with that, but of course, this guy right there. Should John Tortorella be back next season? It's a critical question. The panel is going to have some interesting thoughts. We're going to get their take on all that after this.
You're watching Sin City Beat.
John Tortorella was asked after the 3-0 loss to the Hurricanes whether he'd be back with Vegas. He answered, quote, "I haven't even considered it. I have to swallow this first." GM Kelly McCrimmon brought the 67-year-old coach in response to firing Bruce Cassidy after feeling that the team had lost their spirit under the latter. So Coach Torts led VGK to a 7-1 record to finish out the regular season, and then a special postseason run that came to an unfortunate end on Sunday night. So Tony, should and will Coach Torts be back?
That's the stupidest question I've heard. I'm sorry, that was my Johnny Torts. I think he'll be back. I really do. In the post-game presser after the Game 6 loss, he comes out and says, yes, he wants to digest what happened, loves the team. He really wants to be around the team. And he also kind of hinted that he does want to coach. He said, I want to coach. So I think, and then he's obviously kissing up to the front office, all this first class operation at first class. Why was the guy coaching without his pants? Were they still back in Raleigh? I don't even understand. But in any event, Johnny Torts, I think off season, he goes back to the farm. Maybe he turns some of those horses into harness racing horses, and he's Johnny Trots instead of Johnny Torts.
You really thought about all the complications. But what do you think, really?
I think he's back. I think he's back.
You think he's back, and should he be back?
Yes, absolutely. He pushed the right buttons. They got there to the Cup Final. They ran out of gas, but hey, and now if he can have a full season under his belt, I think we could see some really good things, to be honest with you.
Okay, Case, your take on this. Could have Bruce Cassidy taken this team to the same lengths? Does Tortorella deserve to be back, and will he?
Do they get this far with Cassidy? Probably not, but I don't want to just completely shut the door. I've been so negative when it comes to Johnny Torts, in Tony's words. I feel bad, but even with all that negativity, I don't think he's a great coach. I think he's middle of the road, NHL at best. I still think you probably bring him back. This is a veteran team. He's a veteran coach. I think he fits better. Everyone talks about Ryan Craig being groomed to take the job, the Henderson Silver Knights coach. I don't know if that's a perfect fit for this place and time, so I think you do bring him back. However, I'm not entirely convinced they're going to do it. I think hearing him talk about it, I don't think he's sure. I think it's going to come down to a lot of what Bill Foley wants, and we have no idea. So I'm not 100% sure he'll be back, but I think it's probably the right move.
Was he just a hired gun, Derek? Was this just a situation from March 29th on to see what he can do to the end of June?
It's an interesting opinion, to be sure, because we didn't know that John Tortorella was going to be this good. I don't think anyone had that in their mind, and all of a sudden 7-1, made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final when none of these things seemed possible 2 months ago. So I think that it's transitioned from being sort of a hired gun situation, like you said, to something that now that you've seen the success, it could turn to something more permanent. I'm not quite sure. Like Kay said, I've heard the rumors of Ryan Craig. The problem is I've talked to Ryan Craig and Henderson. I think the world of a guy. That's a really tough sell on the fan base to go from Bruce Cassidy to John Tortorella to Ryan Craig. I could see Ryan Craig as an assistant, perhaps, if he wanted to go back to Henderson and be part of a succession plan just in case Tortorella flames out within like a couple of years. I'm not quite sure yet, but it's an idea worth considering.
Well, this is why I'm so curious about all this, and I'm I want to ask, what you guys would think whether everything changed and they actually did force a Game 7 and they won the Cup, and if your thoughts would change entirely, and we should talk about that. But it's so fascinating, the distinction between a Tortorella and a Brind'Amour. Brind'Amour's a guy who not only won a Cup as a player with the Carolina Hurricanes, right, but then he also became an assistant for many seasons before he ultimately became a head coach. So they groomed him. You would think maybe this would be a nice change to groom a coach like a Ryan Craig and see what could happen with this. But instead, it's just like one guy comes in, another guy comes out. And there's just always that sense of change with this organization. But let me go back to you, Case. What do you think about the fact if Tortorella had won, would it have been a no-brainer for him to stay with this team? And would we not even be having a conversation right now?
I think so. I try not to be results-oriented with things in sports, but if you win the Stanley Cup, you achieve the ultimate thing. If he wants to be back, he's back. I think another thing about Brind'Amour that kind of fits this situation is Brind'Amour, even though he's a player, kind of tough, rugged, meathead player, that Hurricanes are all about analytics. He bought so much into their analytics. He learned up to that. I don't think Tortorella's really that guy. And I think the Golden Knights preferably would be in that lane as well.
Okay, all right. We're going to talk more on that coming up because Carolina's decision to make a move in the net, that changed everything in this series. Coming up, we're going to be dissecting the change from Anderson to Bussey, comparing the contrast to Coach Torts and his decision to stick with Carter Hart. Welcome back to Sin City Beat. Let's take a closer look at the differing approaches of Coach John Tortorella and Coach Rod Brind'Amour. So when Coach Torts took over, he made the change in net to Carter Hart, a player he had previously coached in Philadelphia. Then Coach Rod Brind'Amour made a change in net in this series, moving off of Frederik Andersen, a guy who played tremendous all postseason long, and going to Brandon Bussey in period 3 of game 3, a decision that changed the dynamic of this series. So what does Brind'Amour's willingness to make a change say about him, and what does Tortorella's inability to do so say about him? Derek, give me your take on all that.
I think it came down to loyalty in the end. Obviously, Tortorella and Carter Hart, they go way back to Philadelphia. So it made sense to turn to him, especially when the goaltending was a sticking point all season long, where Aiden Hill was struggling, injury-prone, and then Akira Schmid was good, but really he's only had one playoff series, and that's a tough thing to really rely on at this stage of a game. So what you had at that point was just fine. I'll just stick to who I came to the dance with, whatever. And Frederik Andersen, as far as Rod Brind'Amour goes, there came out reports that said that Andersen was dealing with a knee injury that kept him out for the last 3 games of a series. I don't know if that had something to facilitate the decision, but...
Right. And Frederik, he's 36 compared to Bussey's 27 or
yeah, something? that also played something of a role in it, I'm sure.
Yeah, so there's that age factor that plays into this. But to me, so much of the time, it feels like a guy comes in as a hired gun and he's got to... You pose it as, you got to take the person you brought to the dance and dance with that person. But it's almost like he had to prove to everybody, I'm going to stick with my guy coming in later after the fact. Carter Hart dealing with an injury most this season. So it became his guy. But should he have, even for a game, just to switch it up, energy, give a little different juice, the same reason why GM Kelly McCrimmon moved off Cassidy for a different voice, why wouldn't you just test it out, Case?
I would have loved to have seen it. I just was resigned to the fact early on that it was never going to happen. I mean, I know we've argued about this before on the show, so we don't need to relitigate it. But even when Carter Hart, during his great stretch of this playoffs, was nowhere near what Aiden Hill was in 2023 when they won the Cup. You signed the guy to this huge contract for 5 years. How when he's struggling this bad at historically poor finals? If I was John Tortorella, I would have to see what it looked like with Aiden Hill.
Yeah, just one game, Tony, right? I mean,
maybe in practice he saw something that wasn't right, that didn't work. Maybe that's what led him to say, no, absolutely not. We're not going to change goalies. That's a dumb question. But to me, so Aiden Hill, though, hadn't played in the game since, May 9th? April. It was April
right.
9th, maybe. April 9th, I think. So in any event, you're going to go with a goaltender that's going to just be a little rusty for starters, and then he hadn't played well. But then you have Carter Hart, and goaltending was always an issue. On one of your 100 shows, Mike, I always said that goaltending was the major issue here.
Right.
And Carter Hart goes down in history as the worst Stanley Cup Final goaltender in history. based on the numbers.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
he gave up four goals.
I mean, I wasn't. I
each
haven't
of the
looked
5
at
games.
every, but that statistically, he really is.
Statistically, he's the worst, the absolute worst.
So why? Further proving my point, but to me, it just reeks of is John Tortorella being 67, and we're not an ageist show, but I'm just saying, is it curmudgeon-y? Is it curmudgeon-y old man?
No,
to
he
just
saw that.
to not just make a change.
Stuck that in there. Okay. In Italian, we call it stunad. Like he's really thick-headed.
Is it?
And,
He's
think? Old school Italian. I would, I've got uncles like that and stuff.
But do you think there's
my uncle Augie's definitely he's
stunad?
He's stunad.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's I think it.
He does he like his pasta al dente too? Augie?
No, he's throwing it at the wall to see if it sticks, like McCrimmon said.
That's important. But you know what I'm saying, Kate? I mean, what do you guys think there? Do you think there's a curmudgeon-y aspect to just like I'm gonna go down with the ship and this is my decision and I'm not gonna really reevaluate the nuances of this in series?
I think that's kind of just an old school mentality in general, not just limited to the playoffs, that sometimes you have coaches and front office personnel who are just stuck in their ways, who feel like this way has worked in the past, why wouldn't it work now? And that's worked in the past, but the problem is the game continues to evolve. You can't just stay in one spot forever. Maybe Tortorella got stuck in that. I don't know entirely what happened. It would have been nice to see a change, but unfortunately we'll never know.
So, Tony, you already said this. We all see what the Super says. Was John Tortorella outcoached by Rod Brindamore? Yeah. You said that, Case, you're nodding.
Absolutely. I just think Tortorella's really stuck in his ways. It worked for a lot of the time, just, preaching belief. But Rod Brindamore made adjustments. The goaltender is just the headliner. He switched up their forward lines. He kind of changed the defensive rotations. I feel like Brindamore had answers, and Tortorella ultimately didn't.
All right, there you go. So we're going to look ahead to the offseason now. What needs does Vegas have? What moves should they make? More on that and more on Kelly McCrimmon after this. Welcome back to Sin City Beat. It's officially the offseason for the Vegas Golden Knights. So, Case, what are the biggest needs for this team right now? Of course, they got to figure out head coach. But what else is Kelly McCrimmon going to do from a roster standpoint?
I think they got to free up some space. They're up against the cap as usual, and they have a lot of contracts that don't look very good right now. I know a lot of fans are just banging the drum, trade everyone. We're going to get rid of Aiden Hill, rid of Tomas Hertl, rid of Noah Hannafin now. It's not so easy just to get off of all this. So I think there's going to be some guys shipped out. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it. In the past, when they've had these bad contracts, they've kind of attached future assets. They're running low on future assets now too. So I think you're going to see more pieces going out than coming in.
Tony, during one of our breaks, you were saying, Rasmus Anderson, he's gone, right? You don't feel
No, he's here.
You think he's going to stay?
He's already signed the contract,
okay.
according to my sources. And today, in fact, I said this on one of your 100 shows, I think in the past too. Today, Spit and Chicklets said that the contract's done for $8.5 million a year.
Wow.
I don't know the term, how long, but it was, I heard 8 times 6.
Oh, okay. So during the commercial break, when you said done, I thought you meant he's
done,
gone.
like a done deal
He's
signed.
done deal.
Yeah,
okay. And is that good?
Did you see him and Hannafin? It's the worst pairing defensively I've ever seen on the stinking planet. They're awful. They're absolutely awful. They're awful.
And is that more of an indictment on Rasmus, or is it more?
Maybe it's systematically. Maybe it's with the system. I don't know. They pinch too much. I know. I've talked about that. It typically really came back to bite them. And then in this series, on that hockey stat card, they're at the bottom each and every game. Hannafin, the turnover machine. We've got Barbashev, the cigarette machine. Hanover, the turnover machine. He is the turnover machine. And he had one that cost them a goal there in Game 6.
Okay.
And once again, I'm not sold on those two as a defensive pairing. But the bottom pair they have to work on. And let's face it, Braden McNabb is getting older, and Shea Theodore has maybe a couple of more years left in the tank.
So there's a lot to work on here. Derek, what would be your first, if you were Kelly McCrimmon, what's the first thing you would look to fix?
Mostly trying to figure out as far as the depth goes. We know that Eichel's part of a core, Marner's part of a core. So you know who you can rely on at this stage, but now it's just a matter of filling out the bottom of a lineup, replacing guys, figuring out if there's options in Henderson like Connolly, Bowman, even Cormier, who could fill spots that get vacated during the offseason. It's genuinely the first offseason where I have no idea what's going to happen.
Really?
You could have kind of predict that Alex Pietrangelo was going to come in 2019, was it?
Yeah.
You could kind of predict that Jack Eichel was the play. This is genuinely the first year where I have no idea what happens, where I told this to everyone. It's the most excited I've been for an offseason, but it's also the genuinely most terrifying
No
I've
Dylan
been.
Larkin? No Larkin here?
I mean, we did talk about
We
him
did
on
talk
the last
about
show. There could be a trade,
Yeah,
a move
that's-
for that.
You never know
That's
if
done
you
too.
never
No,
know
just
if a
kidding.
big game hunter.
You bring up a good point with Jack Eichel case. Is there, I mean, a lot left to be desired from his play in the Stanley Cup. What's your take on Jack Eichel and how he fits into this team's future?
Yeah, he wasn't great in the Stanley Cup. There's no getting around it. I still think going forward, there's so many. They have a top 5, talent-wise, Eichel and Marner. There are so many teams that would be falling over themselves to still have, probably 2 or 3 more years left with those as your top 2 in their prime. So I think ultimately, even though you're disappointed with how Jack Eichel performed down the stretch, you still feel good going with him as the face of the franchise moving
Okay,
forward.
we got 1 minute left. What's the biggest prediction you guys have for offseason? It could be coach, it could be player. Give me one.
Tortorella flies back to get his clothes in Raleigh. You caught me off guard.
You love that he said he left his glove. We're going to game
You
7.
caught me off guard, man.
So
I don't know.
I'm keeping my clothes there. What about you?
Aiden Hill rejoins Bruce Cassidy wherever he winds up. I think
Really?
goalie's a huge issue for this team. I do not like Carter Hart as the goalie going forward, but I think he's going to be next
30
year.
seconds.
Kelly McCrimmon gets a call from Don Sweeney from Boston saying, so we have this Czech player named David Pastrnak. He's starting to kind of get unhappy with how we're stagnating a little bit. So would you mind sending us Tomas Hertl just to be, buddy?
Look at that. All right,
get
some
rid of
big
Hertl.
predictions here. A great panel. Thanks for breaking everything down all postseason long. I'm Mike Davis for our whole team here. We appreciate you sticking with us. We'll see you next time here on Sin City Beat.